In this world, heroes don't save people. They sell. They sell hope. They sell fear. And most of all, they sell the idea that someone is watching over you. Vought International owns that idea. From the outside, the world looks familiar. Billboards glow with smiling supes. News anchors praise their bravery. Children wear capes to school, dreaming of laser eyes and godhood. Every city has its protector. Every tragedy has a branded response. But behind the smiles, behind the slogans, behind the perfectly rehearsed rescues, there is a truth no one is supposed to see. Supes are not heroes. They are products. Vought doesn't just manage superheroes, it manufactures them. From birth to branding, every power is measured, tested, monetized. Strength is a statistic. Popularity is a metric. Morality is optional. Vought controls the media that praises them, the science that creates them, the military contracts that deploy them. When a war breaks out, Vought is already there. When a city falls apart, Vought owns the cleanup. When a supe kills someone by accident, Vought writes the apology. Nothing happens without their approval. And if something does happen without it, it disappears. Which is why no one asks questions about Hawkins of Indiana. A small town, quiet streets, fading malls, the kind of place people forget exists the moment they pass the exit sign. On paper, Hawkins is nothing special. Just another dot on the map. Another nowhere town in Middle America. But beneath Hawkins, buried under concrete and lies, sits one of Vaught's most classified facilities. Not a government lab, not a Department of Energy site. A black site. Owned, funded, controlled by Vought International. Hawkins National Laboratory is the name on the sign, a harmless title, boring, official, safe. But behind the locked doors and security checkpoints, this place has nothing to do with energy research. It's about control. Inside the facility, scientists don't wear uniforms. They wear Vought badges. Every hallway has cameras. Every room is monitored. Every experiment is logged, categorized, archived for future profit. This is where Vought goes when Compound 5 isn't enough. Because while strength can be sold, the mind is harder to package. Psychic abilities don't punch through walls. They don't look good on camera. They don't fit into neat action figures. And worst of all, they can't be controlled easily, which is why Vought keeps them secret. The public knows about flying men and indestructible gods. They know about speedsters, shapeshifters, and laser-eyed icons. But psychic powers, telekinesis, remote viewing, those don't exist. Officially, in Hawkins, they are called assets, or more often, subjects. Deep inside the lab, past reinforced doors and soundproof chambers, Dr. Martin Brenner walks calmly through the facility. He is not a rogue scientist, not a visionary gone too far. He is an employee, a valuable one. Brenner doesn't answer to the government. He answers to Vaught's executives, men in suits who never get their hands dirty, who only care about results. His funding comes from corporate accounts. His orders arrive in sealed folders with Vaught's logo stamped on the front. Create something new. Create something controllable. Create something that obeys. Brenner believes in the work. Or at least he tells himself he does. He speaks softly, he smiles gently, he uses words like progress and necessity. But behind his calm eyes is the same truth that drives all of Vaught's experiments. Fear unlocks power. Pain refines it. And children adapt. That belief leads him to a single reinforced room at the heart of the facility. Inside, a young girl sits alone. Her head is shaved. Her hospital gown hangs loosely from her small frame. Wires trail from her scalp. Monitors hum softly around her, recording brain activity that no one fully understands. She is not called by a name. She is called Subject 011. To Vought, she is a prototype. To Brenner, she is proof that the human mind can be turned into a weapon. The room is silent. Then slowly, something changes. A metal block on the table begins to tremble. At first, it's barely noticeable. A soft vibration like a passing truck outside. The scientists glance at their monitors. Readings spike, heart rate increases, neural activity explodes across the screens. The block lifts. No hands touch it. No wires pull it upward. It simply rises, floating in the air, twisting slightly, obeying a force no one can see. Behind a one-way mirror, several Vought executives watch in complete silence. No applause. No shock. Only interest. One of them leans forward, eyes narrowing, already calculating market value, military potential, control protocols. The block slams into the wall. Subject 011's nose begins to bleed. And in that moment, Vought realizes something terrifying. They haven't just created another Supe. They've created something that doesn't need muscles, or costumes, or cameras. They've created a power that doesn't ask for permission. And for the first time in a world owned by Vought, something is growing that even they may not be able to control. 11 was never an accident. That is the lie Hawkins' lab told the world. That is the lie even some of the scientists told themselves. But deep beneath the concrete floors, behind locked doors and red warning lights, 11 had a real name inside Vought International's files. Project Mindstorm. Not a miracle. Not a mistake. A prototype. From the very beginning, Vought wasn't interested in creating another flying hero or another laser-eyed god. They already had plenty of those. What Vought wanted was something far more valuable and far more terrifying. A weapon that didn't need cameras. A weapon that didn't need crowds. A weapon that could kill you from a continent away and make it look like you never existed at all. Dr. Martin Brenner understood this better than anyone. To the outside world, Brenner was a government scientist, a cold man, a necessary evil. But inside Vought, he was praised as a visionary, the architect of something entirely new. While Compound 5 created physical gods, Brenner believed the next evolution of power wouldn't be muscles or lasers. It would be the mind. 11 was injected with a refined version of Compound 5 before she could even form words. Not enough to turn her into a Supe the public would recognize. No strength, no flight, no spectacle. Instead, Vought rewrote her nervous system. Every neuron enhanced, every synapse accelerated. Her brain became something closer to a living antenna than a human organ. But power alone wasn't enough. Brenner had learned something disturbing through years of failure. The test subjects who lived the longest, the ones who showed real potential, weren't the happy ones. They were the afraid ones. Fear, Brenner believed, stripped the mind down to its rawest state. It removed limits, morality, self-preservation. In fear, the brain stopped asking, should, and only asked how. So he built 11's childhood around terror. Isolation tanks, white rooms with no corners. Endless silence broken only by commands. Every scream she swallowed made her stronger. Every tear sharpened her focus. And then came the final step, the upside down. Vought didn't discover it by accident. They found it while searching for new energy sources. Another world layered on top of our own, decaying, hostile, alive. Most test subjects exposed to it went insane. Some died instantly. Others begged for death. 11 survived. Not only survived, she connected. Brenner realized the upside down wasn't just another dimension. It was a signal, a psychic ocean, vibrating with thoughts that didn't belong to any human mind. When 11 was submerged in sensory deprivation and pushed toward that place, her abilities multiplied. She could hear thoughts that weren't there, see places she'd never been, touch people without touching them at all. That's when Vought stopped asking if Project Mindstorm would work and started planning how to use it. Remote assassinations were the first goal. No witnesses, no weapons, no political fallout. A target simply collapses. Brain hemorrhage, aneurysm, unexplained stroke, clean, invisible, perfect. Crowd control came next. Fear amplification, emotional suppression, the ability to turn riots into silence, or silence into riots. With the right signal, entire cities could be nudged like chess pieces. And then there was the final ambition, the one even some Vought executives whispered about instead of saying out loud. Thought manipulation. Not mind control. Not yet, but influence. Suggestion. Planting ideas so gently the victim would swear they were their own. Elections, markets, wars, all decided by a girl sitting alone in a dark room. 11 wasn't being trained to be a hero. She was being trained to be invisible. And that was exactly why she terrified Vaught's most powerful asset. Miles away, inside a pristine screening room high above the city, Homelander watched the footage for the first time. Grainy camera angles, monitors filled with static. A small girl in a hospital gown, blood running from her nose as alarms screamed in the background. He watched as a grown man dropped to the floor, bones twisting, eyes bursting, without a single finger laid on him. The room was silent. Homelander didn't blink. For the first time in his life, he wasn't looking at someone weaker than him. He wasn't looking at a fan, or a soldier, or a toy Vought had built to worship him. He was looking at something uncontrollable. And for the first time since he was a child himself, Homelander felt something tighten in his chest. Not anger, not jealousy, fear. Because if Vought could make this, what did that make him? And more importantly, what would happen if she ever decided not to listen? Vought International didn't discover the upside down by accident. They found it the same way they found everything else worth owning, by following money, power, and human suffering. Deep beneath Hawkins' National Laboratory, far below the rooms where children screamed in sensory deprivation tanks, there existed another facility. One that never appeared on blueprints, one that even most Vought employees didn't know existed. They called it the Threshold Division. At first, the upside down wasn't understood as a world. It was categorized as a resource, an environment where physics bent, where energy behaved unpredictably, where life evolved without rules. To Vought, that made it priceless. Early probes were sent through small, unstable gates, remote drones equipped with cameras, radiation sensors, and biological scanners. What they found terrified the scientists and thrilled the executives. The upside down was alive, not metaphorically, not spiritually. It was a self-sustaining ecosystem fueled by something Vought had never been able to manufacture at scale before. Fear. Every reading spiked when living beings entered the dimension. Heart rates rose, neural activity exploded. The environment itself responded, tendrils shifting, spores reacting, shadows moving with intent. Fear wasn't a byproduct. It was the fuel source. And suddenly everything made sense. Why Subject 11's powers amplified near the gates. Why psychic activity tore holes through reality. Why creatures crossed over during moments of panic and violence. Fear wasn't just emotional. It was energetic. Vought executives stopped calling it the Upside Down. In internal documents it became Asset UD. The plan was simple, brutal, profitable. First, the creatures. If Compound 5 could turn humans into gods, what would it do to organisms that evolved in a nightmare dimension? Vought scientists theorized super soldiers that didn't need propaganda, weapons that didn't hesitate, creatures that could be unleashed and plausibly denied. Second, the energy. The Upside Down generated power without combustion, without reactors, without waste. Entire cities could be powered by a single stabilized gate. Energy harvested directly from fear-induced dimensional feedback. Clean, endless, untraceable. Third, and most valuable of all, fear itself. Vought didn't just sell heroes. They sold threats. Crime rates spiked. Supes were needed. Foreign enemies? Supes were deployed. Public unrest? Supes restored order. But fear was inconsistent. The Upside Down promised controlled terror, manufactured monsters, events calibrated to keep humanity just scared enough to obey and pay. Of course, none of this was public. The scientists who worked closest to Asset UD signed contracts that didn't just include NDAs. They included exit clauses. One by one, researchers vanished. Some were reassigned on paper. Others were reported dead in accidents. A few were never acknowledged at all. But whispers spread through the facility. People talked about screams coming from the observation rooms long after shifts ended, about radios picking up voices that didn't belong to anyone alive, about shadows moving when no one was there. Then came Subject Breach 001. The first Demogorgon wasn't meant to escape. It was meant to be dissected. But the creature wasn't dumb. It learned patterns, timings, human behavior. And during a late-night energy extraction test, when fear levels spiked too high, the gate widened for half a second longer than planned. That was enough. The Demogorgon came through like a bullet through wet paper. Security footage showed guards firing uselessly as the creature tore through reinforced steel. Hallways filled with blood, alarms screaming until they abruptly stopped, one by one. By morning, 12 people were dead. 3 bodies were never found. Vaught's response was immediate. Hawkins residents were told there had been a gas leak, a tragic industrial failure, hazardous chemicals, structural collapse. Local news ran the story once, then never again. The facility was sealed. The bodies were incinerated. Families were paid, records were erased. Officially, nothing unusual had happened. Unofficially, everything had changed. Because for the first time, Vought understood something they hadn't planned for. The Upside Down wasn't just dangerous, it was aware. In the days after the breach, instruments continued to record activity, despite no one crossing over. Energy spikes, environmental shifts, patterns that resembled observation. Something on the other side was watching the gates, watching the humans, watching 11, not as prey, not as a resource, but as a threat. And somewhere in the dark, infinite expanse of the Upside Down, something intelligent leaned closer to the veil between worlds. Waiting. The night 11 escapes is not quiet. It is not planned. And it is not heroic. It begins with screaming. Deep inside the Hawkins facility, alarms detonate through concrete corridors as red lights flash like open wounds. Scientists run, not with purpose, but with panic. Something has gone wrong, something has crossed over. The breach wasn't supposed to be this large. In a containment chamber far below the surface, reality tears open like wet paper. The air freezes, gravity bends, and from the darkness between worlds, a creature forces itself through. Not cautiously, not hunting, but fleeing from something even worse behind it. The Demogorgon doesn't roar. It slaughters. Armed guards fire until their magazines click empty. Their bullets slow it, but fear feeds it. Blood coats the white walls. Cameras catch only fragments. Bodies lifted, torn, discarded like broken toys. The footage will later be classified, buried, and erased. But 11 feels all of it. She collapses to her knees in her cell, hands clamped to her ears, as the screams bleed into her mind. Every death echoes inside her skull. Every fear slams into her chest. The lights above her flicker violently. She knows this feeling. This is what they trained her for. A nearby blast throws the cell door halfway open. Smoke pours in. Somewhere above, the creature howls. Closer now. 11 doesn't think. She runs. Bare feet slap against cold concrete as she stumbles through corridors she was never meant to see alone. Blood streaks the floor. A scientist crawls toward her, eyes wide with recognition, mouth opening to beg. And then, the ceiling caves in behind him. 11 doesn't look back. She reaches an emergency exit. A keypad flashes red. She raises her hand instinctively, nose already bleeding, and the metal buckles inward like soft clay. The door rips free from its hinges and crashes down the hallway. For the first time in her life, she sees the night sky. She bursts out into the woods, gasping, lungs burning, the cold air cutting into her skin. Behind her, the facility burns, sirens wail, helicopters rise. But 11 doesn't stop running. She crashes through branches, trips over roots, tears her hospital gown on thorns. The forest feels wrong. Not safe, not wild, but watched. Red dots flicker briefly across the trees, the cameras. She emerges onto a road and freezes. This is Hawkins. But it is not the Hawkins it was meant to be. Bright Vought banners hang from streetlights. Digital billboards flash smiling supes promising safety, protection, and hope. Armed security patrols roll past in armored vans. Drones hover above rooftops like mechanical vultures. Every lamppost has a camera. Every store window reflects her back at herself. A shaking, bleeding child with no place to hide. She ducks into an alley as a patrol passes. 2 Vought guards laugh about a commercial shoot scheduled for the morning. A supe lands at the end of the street, cape snapping in the wind, eyes glowing faintly as he scans the area. 11 presses herself against the wall, holding her breath. There are adults everywhere, and none of them are safe. She tries to reach out, not to move anything, not to hurt anyone, but to listen, to find someone kind, someone normal. All she hears is noise. Fear, greed, loyalty to Vought, adoration for Supes. No one is thinking about helping a lost girl. No one is even looking for one. A door opens nearby. A woman steps out, phone in hand, eyes glued to the screen. 11 takes a step forward, hope flickering. The woman looks up, sees her, and immediately raises the phone. "Hey," she says loudly, "there's a kid out here. Looks like one of those Vought experiments." 11 panics. The phone explodes in the woman's hand. Glass shreds her palm. She screams. 11 bolts. Sirens begin again. Closer this time. In a Vought command center miles away, screens light up simultaneously, thermal signatures, facial recognition, breach data syncing in real time. A man in a tailored suit watches 11's grainy image freeze on screens. Subject 11 confirmed outside containment, he says calmly. Another executive leans forward. Alive? For now. The room goes silent. Then the order is given. Activate level red child retrieval. Across Hawkins, protocols engage instantly, roadblocks deploy, supes are rerouted, drones descend lower, cameras lock onto every street, every alley, every shadow where a child might hide. 11 runs through a town that was never meant to save her. And the entire world is now watching. Vought International was very good at burying its mistakes. Too good. But every once in a while something slipped through the cracks, a whisper that didn't belong, a name that showed up where it shouldn't, a pattern that didn't quite add up. That's when Billy Butcher started paying attention. It began as background noise, the kind most people ignored. A deleted police report from a nowhere town in Indiana. 3 missing scientists reassigned posthumously. A sealed NDA quietly filed under a shell corporation that didn't exist 6 months ago. To the world, it was nothing. To Butcher, it was blood in the water. He stood in a dimly lit safe house, boots up on a table that had seen better decades, scrolling through a burner phone with a crooked grin slowly forming on his face. Vought logos kept appearing where they shouldn't. Medical facilities that weren't on any map. Expense reports routed through the same internal department Vought used when things went very, very wrong. Boy, Butcher muttered, that's not subtle, is it? Across the room, Mother's Milk looked up from his laptop. Unlike Butcher, didn't smile when something smelled bad. He frowned, because he knew exactly what it usually meant. You seeing it too? asked. Butcher tossed the phone onto the table. Missing eggheads, black site lab, town lockdown tighter than a Supes PR image after a massacre. Mem's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling satellite data, budget reallocations, internal memos that were never meant to see daylight. The more he dug, the quieter the room became. Finally, he stopped. That department, said carefully, it's not just R&D. Butcher tilted his head. Go on. It's special containment, same division Vought used during the early Compound 5 trials, the bad ones, the ones they pretend never happened. That got Butcher's full attention. Continued. They're spending money like they're scared, not investing, not developing, containing. Frenchie, half reclined on a couch surrounded by dismantled weapons and chemical kits, froze mid-motion. His eyes narrowed, the playful chaos draining from his face. No, Frenchie said softly. This pattern, I have seen it before. He stood, walking toward the screen, pointing at a string of redacted medical terms. Neural overstimulation, sensory isolation, trauma-based conditioning. Vought did this once, Frenchie said, years ago in Europe, children. Not Supes like Homelander. Smaller, stranger. He swallowed. None of them lived long. The room fell silent. Butcher leaned back, lighting a cigarette he wasn't supposed to have indoors. So let me get this straight, he said. Vaught's nicked a few scientists, locked down a town, buried the paperwork, and you're telling me it's worse than Compound 5? Nodded grimly. Compound V made monsters. This looks like they're trying to make gods. Another file opened on the screen, security footage heavily degraded, and a hallway camera, a gurney. A small figure restrained beneath harsh lights. The face was blurred, but the shape wasn't. That a kid? Butcher asked quietly. Frenchie didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice lacked its usual humor. Yes. Clenched his jaw. Psychic indicators, electromagnetic spikes, brain activity off the charts. Whatever this child is, she's not just another Supe. Butcher stared at the frozen image. A child. Small, alone, surrounded by machines and men in lab coats who thought the paperwork made them innocent. Something dark shifted behind his eyes. He'd seen this before, different place, different time, same smell. Vought hurting people who couldn't fight back. They're covering it up, MM continued. Media blackouts, fake gas leaks, industrial accidents. Same old playbook. Butcher crushed his cigarette into the table. Yeah, he said slowly. And every time they do that, it's because they're scared of what happens if the truth gets out. Frenchie leaned back against the wall. If this child exists, he said, and if she is what I think she is, even Homelander would not like this. That earned a sharp look from Butcher. Homelander doesn't like competition, Frenchie added, especially not the kind he cannot punch. The implication hung heavy in the air. MM closed the laptop. So what's the move? Butcher stood up, grabbing his coat. The grin was gone now, replaced by something colder, something sharper. We find the kid, he said. We find the lab. And we find out exactly what Vaught's been cooking. He paused at the door, voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. And if Vaught's hurting kids again? Butcher turned back to them, eyes burning with promise. We burn it down. Hawkins was not a normal small town anymore. It looked quiet on the surface. Tree-lined streets, school buses, white fences. But everything about it was owned, branded, and watched. Supes smiled down from billboards. Vought logos were stamped on schools, clinics, even the town welcome sign. Every television played the same thing. Heroes saving the world, heroes smiling for cameras, heroes reminding everyone who was in charge. Mike Wheeler grew up believing those smiles were real. So did Dustin. So did Lucas. They weren't just kids in a strange town. They were kids raised inside corporate worship. Every lunch break at school turned into debates about Supes. Who was strongest? Who would win in a fight? Who deserved to be on the 7? Posters of Homelander were taped inside lockers like religious icons. Teachers played Vought-approved educational reels, reminding students that Supes kept them safe, that Vought protected America, that fear was unpatriotic. And the kids believed it. At least, they used to. Everything changed the night they met 11. She didn't understand their world, not the way they did. When Mike tried to show her a TV, her body tensed. The moment a Supe appeared on screen, her breath grew shallow, her hands trembled. The smiling hero felt like a monster, wearing a human face. 11 had learned one truth very early in life. It's people with power are never kind. Mike didn't know how to explain that Homelander was supposed to be a hero, that Vought said so, that everyone said so. He only knew that the girl sitting in front of him looked more afraid of heroes than of the dark. Dustin tried to lighten the mood, rambling about how cool it would be to have powers, how awesome it would be to fly or laser people. 11 flinched at the word powers. Lucas noticed. He always noticed things others didn't. The way she stared at exits, the way she listened for footsteps, the way her eyes hardened whenever sirens passed. She wasn't dreaming about being a hero. She was surviving. Still, somehow, she stayed. She stayed with them in the basement, ate Eggo waffles like they were sacred, listened to Dustin explain science he barely understood, watched Mike talk endlessly about games and strategies and worlds where rules made sense. With them, 11 wasn't a weapon. She wasn't an experiment. She wasn't properties. She was just a kid. And that terrified her more than anything, because kids in this world didn't survive long. Will felt it before he could explain it. The air felt wrong, not cold, hollow, like sound traveled too far, like shadows lingered longer than they should. Sometimes, when the lights flickered, Will swore he saw the walls breathe. The upside down wasn't just leaking anymore, it was watching. And something else was watching too. The Supe patrols. They rolled through Hawkins in armored vehicles, faces hidden behind tinted visors, uniforms stamped with Vought insignias. They weren't there to protect. They were there to retrieve. Everyone knew it. No one said it. When the sirens wailed outside Mike's house, 11 froze. Her fear wasn't loud. It was absolute. Mike whispered that everything would be okay, that Supes didn't hurt people, that they were the good guys. 11 shook her head. She knew better. Boots hit the pavement outside, and the Supes' voice barked orders. Thermal scanners swept the street. One of them paused, looked directly at the basement window. Will's nose started bleeding. 11 felt it. The invisible pressure closing in, the way it always did before pain followed. She hid behind the kids, shaking, fighting the instinct to run. Running never worked. The basement door rattled. A Supe forced it open. He was smiling. He stepped forward, reaching out like she was a lost puppy. His voice was calm, rehearsed, gentle. The voice of someone trained to make fear feel unreasonable. 11 didn't scream. She didn't raise her hands. She didn't move at all. The air cracked. The Supe's neck twisted violently to the side with a sound like snapping wood. His body collapsed before his smile faded. Blood pooled on the basement floor. The kids stared in horror. 11 stared too. Not at the body, but at her own hands. She had protected them. And now, there was no going back. Outside, the sirens grew louder. And Hawkins finally realized something far worse than monsters had arrived. A child who could fight back. Homelander did not feel fear often. In a world where he could tear tanks in half and melt crowds with his eyes, fear had become an abstract concept, something other people experienced. Civilians, politicians, even other Supes. But that night, standing alone inside a Vought monitoring room, Homelander felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. The screen replayed the footage again. A grainy security camera. A hallway drenched in red emergency lights, scientists screaming. And at the center of it all, a small girl with a shaved head. 11. She didn't scream, she didn't flinch. She stood perfectly still as armed guards were lifted off the ground like toys, their bones snapping midair. No lasers, no super strength, no flashy spectacle. Just thought. Homelander leaned closer to the screen, his smile gone now. "This isn't Compound 5, he muttered. The executives behind him didn't answer. They couldn't, because for the first time, none of them knew what to say. Homelander had been engineered, sculpted, raised to believe he was chosen. Every Supe, every power, every miracle. It all led back to him. But 11, she wasn't a product meant for applause. She wasn't raised under studio lights or trained to smile for crowds. She didn't need admiration to function. And that disturbed him, because power without worship was dangerous. Homelander turned, eyes glowing faintly. Why wasn't I told about her? One executive stammered something about containment, another mentioned Brenner. A third suggested the situation was under control. Homelander smiled. Then he crushed the remote in his hand. I'll handle it. The next morning, Hawkins woke up to sirens, banners, and cameras. Vought had arrived. A stage was erected near the town square almost overnight. American flags draped over armored trucks, news helicopters hovered overhead, and right on schedule, Homelander descended from the sky in a blur of red, white, and blue. The crowd erupted. Parents lifted children onto their shoulders. Phones came out, tears flowed. Hawkins had never seen anything like this. Homelander smiled the smile they all loved, wide, perfect, reassuring. "My fellow Americans," he said into the microphone, voice warm and heroic. "Vought has reason to believe this town has been the target of a dangerous terrorist experiment." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "But don't worry," Homelander continued. "I'm here now." Applause thundered. From the outside it was flawless. A hero arriving to protect a small town. Another chapter in Vaught's endless propaganda machine. But behind the scenes, the smile vanished. Inside a closed-off school hallway, Homelander hovered inches above the floor, eyes scanning every inch of the building. His super hearing picked up heartbeats, breathing, fear. He ignored the soldiers, ignored the agents. He was searching for something else. Then he felt it. A pressure, like static crawling across his brain, like someone was staring back. Homelander stopped. Slowly he turned toward a locked classroom door. On the other side, 11 sat frozen. Her hands trembled. Blood trickled from her nose as her vision blurred. She hadn't meant to do anything. But she felt him, and he felt her. Homelander placed a hand on the door and gently pushed it open. Their eyes met. For a brief moment, the world went quiet. Homelander expected fear, screaming, crying. Instead, 11 stared at him with wide, confused eyes. Not in awe, not in worship, but in recognition, like she knew what he really was. Homelander smiled again, smaller this time, curious. "Well," he said softly, tilting his head. "There you are." 11's breathing grew shallow, the pressure in her head intensified. The lights flickered. Homelander's smile faltered, because for the first time in his life, something was pushing back. 11's nose began to bleed faster. Her knees buckled as invisible force rippled through the room. Desks rattled, windows cracked. Homelander took a step back. Just one. And that was all it took. Outside, cameras rolled, flags waved. The world cheered its greatest hero. Inside that classroom, Homelander stared at a bleeding child and realized, with horrifying clarity, he was not alone at the top anymore. And for the first time ever, Homelander was interested. Hawkins had never been quiet. But now it was holding its breath. Sirens wailed in the distance as black Vought vehicles sealed off entire streets, their tires screeching against cracked asphalt. As soldiers in tactical gear took positions behind houses, schools, and storefronts, rifles raised, fingers shaking. Overhead, a familiar shadow passed slowly across the clouds. Homelander had arrived. To the world, this was a routine operation. Another controlled event, another heroic intervention. Cameras were already rolling, drones hovering at a safe distance, ready to capture America's favorite savior doing what he did best. But beneath the polished smiles and rehearsed statements, something was wrong. Homelander didn't smile as he descended into Hawkins. He frowned. Inside an abandoned middle school gym, 11 stood frozen. Her nose was already bleeding, a thin red line running down to her lips. The air around her vibrated, lockers rattling, lights flickering violently. Mike and the others were gone now, dragged away by the boys just moments earlier, screaming her name as they were forced into a van. She was alone. Again. The gym doors creaked open. boots echoed against the polished floor. Homelander stepped inside slowly, cape brushing the ground, eyes locked onto the small figure standing at the center of the room. His smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "So," he said casually, glancing at the floating debris around her. "You're the little problem everyone's been whispering about." 11 didn't answer. She raised her hand. The air exploded. An invisible force slammed into Homelander, launching him backward through the gym wall and into the parking lot beyond. Concrete shattered, cars flipped like toys, soldiers screamed as shockwaves rippled outward, blowing out windows for blocks. For a split second, just one, Homelander lay still beneath the rubble. The world watched. Then he stood up, slowly. Dust rolled off his shoulders as he straightened, eyes wide, not with rage but with something far worse. Fear. He wiped blood from the corner of his mouth and stared at it, confused, disbelieving. "That's new," he muttered. 11 screamed. Every light in Hawkins burst simultaneously. Street lamps exploded, power lines snapped. The sky itself seemed to bend as the pressure around her intensified. Homelander was lifted off the ground, held in midair by a force he couldn't see, couldn't punch, couldn't intimidate. His ears rang, his vision blurred. Voices whispered at the edge of his mind. Not cheering crowds, not adoring fans, but screaming. He dropped to one knee as the pressure increased, bones creaking under invisible weight. Buildings around them began to collapse inward, pulled toward the epicenter of 11's power. Asphalt cracked, the ground split open. Homelander gritted his teeth and roared, firing his heat vision wildly. The beams sliced through buildings, igniting fires across Hawkins. Entire blocks were reduced to flaming wreckage in seconds. This wasn't a fight. It was a disaster. 11 staggered, struggling to hold him. Blood poured from her nose now, from her ears. Her hands shook violently as she pushed harder, digging deeper into the power Brenner had carved into her. For the first time in his life, Homelander felt small. He lunged forward, breaking free just long enough to grab her by the throat and slam her through the gym floor. The building collapsed inward as they crashed into the basement below. Silence. Then, a pulse. Homelander was thrown back again, this time screaming, as his mind flooded with memories that weren't his. Cold rooms, needles, isolation, applause that felt hollow, love that was conditional. He saw himself for what he really was. He hovered unsteadily in the air, chest heaving, eyes darting wildly. "This isn't possible," he whispered. "I'm supposed to be the strongest." 11 rose from the rubble slowly, barely standing now. She didn't look angry. She looked tired. She pointed at him one last time. And Hawkins broke. A massive shockwave tore through the town, leveling entire streets in seconds. Fires raged, cars were flung into buildings. From the outside, it looked like a war zone. And then it stopped. Homelander landed hard on the ground, breathing heavily. He could still move, still fight. But he didn't. Instead, he laughed nervously, straightening his suit as Vought helicopters rushed in overhead. The cameras zoomed closer. In minutes, the narrative was set. Vought spokespeople smiled on live television, calling it a controlled training exercise, a demonstration of advanced supe response tactics, an unfortunate but necessary operation. Hawkins was erased with words. Homelander turned back to 11 as soldiers surrounded her, weapons raised. He leaned close, his voice low enough that only she could hear. The fear was gone now, replaced by something darker, possessive. "You belong to me," he whispered, and for the first time since she escaped the lab. 11 believed him. Hawkins doesn't fall apart all at once. It leaks. It starts with the air. People don't notice it at first. Just a sudden cold that doesn't match the season. Breath fogs in July, streetlights flicker, not out, just enough to make drivers uneasy. Dogs refuse to walk past certain houses. Birds vanish completely. Then the power goes out. Not the clean kind, not a blackout. This is different. Electronics scream before dying. Radios hiss with voices that aren't tuned to any station. TVs flash images of places that don't exist. A red sky, dead trees, something massive moving behind the clouds. And then, across Hawkins, the walls begin to bleed in basements, in school hallways, inside grocery stores. Cracks form in the air itself, like invisible glass under pressure. They split open with a sound like tearing flesh, and from inside pours darkness. Thick, wet, alive. The first portal opens in a residential street. A mother is loading groceries into her car when the pavement caves inward, collapsing into a pit of black vines and drifting ash. She doesn't even have time to scream before something pulls her down. Screams follow. Creatures crawl out. Not just demogorgons. These are wronger, leaner, faster. Their skin looks half-formed, like the upside-down rushed their creation. They move like animals that learned how to hunt people by watching them die. Hawkins erupts into chaos. People run, cars crash, sirens wail, then cut off. And within minutes, Vought International does what it always does. They send Supes. A train arrives first, red blur slicing through the streets. He laughs at first, until one of the creatures reacts fast enough to clip him mid-run, sending him skidding through 3 storefronts. The Deep tries to control the situation near Lover's Lake. He doesn't understand why the water won't respond. The creatures don't swim. They crawl along the surface, ignoring him completely. Starlight fires blast after blast of light into the darkness, only to realize the creatures aren't retreating. They're adapting. Translucent membranes form over their eyes. Their bodies harden. One of them shrieks, not in pain but in recognition. These things have learned what Supes are, and they are not impressed. Homelander arrives last. Hovering above the town, cape still, smile fixed for the cameras, already circling at the edges of the chaos. He expects fear, worship, relief. Instead, something looks back at him from inside one of the portals. Something old. Something that doesn't flinch. For the first time in years, Homelander hesitates. Inside Vought Tower, the mood shifts from arrogance to panic. This isn't Compound V. This isn't a terrorist attack. This isn't something they can brand, spin, or sell toys for. Marketing teams scramble, throwing out ideas that die the second someone pulls up live footage of civilians being dragged screaming into holes in reality. An executive whispers the words no one at Vought ever wants to say. We don't control this. Orders fly. Containment protocols, blackouts, media suppression. Hawkins is labelled a quarantine zone, then a chemical disaster, then a foreign attack. The story changing faster than the situation itself. But nothing stops the portals. They spread like an infection. Homes collapse inward, streets fold into twisted reflections of themselves. The upside down doesn't just overlap Hawkins. It replaces it block by block. And beneath it all, something moves. 11 feels it before anyone else. Not like the mind flayer, not cold and commanding. This presence is deeper, older. It doesn't want control, it doesn't want conquest. It wants release. The creatures freeze mid-attack, Supes pause. Even Homelander feels it. A pressure in his skull, a whisper that doesn't speak in words. The portals widen, and from the largest tear in the center of Hawkins, a silhouette begins to form. Not a beast, not a hive mind, but something vast enough that the upside down itself seems to bend around it. Something that makes the mind flayer feel like a scout, like a warning. As the sky darkens and the ground trembles, one truth becomes clear to everyone watching. Human, supe, or monster alike. This invasion was never the real threat. It was just the door opening, and whatever is waking up on the other side was never meant to be found. The truth doesn't arrive all at once. It leaks, like blood from a wound you didn't know was there. 11 sits in the dark of an abandoned safe house, knees pulled to her chest, the hum of old fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The world outside is quiet for once. No sirens, no screaming, no helicopters circling with Vought logos painted on their bellies. Just silence. She should feel safe. But safety has never lasted long enough for her to trust it. Across the room, Butcher stands over a dusty metal table, flipping through a stack of stolen Vought files. Paper records. Old-fashioned. The kind that don't disappear with a keystroke. He tosses one aside, then another, jaw tightening with every page. Finally, he stops. 11 feels it before he speaks. Something heavy has landed between them. Why? Butcher mutters, not looking at her. You ever wonder why they never came looking for you like normal people? 11 shakes her head slowly, her voice is small. They wanted me back. Butcher lets out a dry, humorless laugh. Yeah, course they did. He turns the folder around and slides it across the table toward her. The pages are filled with words she barely understands. Project designations, financial transfers, signatures, a familiar name stamped over and over again. Brenner. She freezes. He wasn't some mad scientist hiding from the world, Butcher continues. He was on payroll. Vaught's payroll. 11's breathing becomes shallow. Her fingers hover over the pages, but don't touch them, like they might burn her. They paid for the lab, Butcher says. Paid for the drugs, paid for the guards. Every scream you let out, every test, every time they locked you in that room. He finally looks at her. They billed it. The words hit her harder than any punch. 11's mind fractures backward. Cold floors, electrodes biting into her skin. Brenner's voice telling her to focus. Telling her she was special. Telling her this was necessary. She remembers believing him. No, she whispers. Butcher doesn't soften it, he never does. They never meant to let you walk free, kid, he says. There was no endgame where you got a normal life. No school, no friends. Just bigger rooms, more tests, more blood. 11 finally touches the papers. Her hands begin to shake. She sees numbers, dollar amounts so high they stop feeling real. Line after line marked approved, profitable, promising results. Her pain translated into profit margins. They sold you, Butcher says quietly, same way they sell all of them. Only difference is, you weren't smiling for the cameras. Her chest tightens, a low sound escapes her throat. Not a scream, not a sob, but something broken and raw. The lights above them flicker as the room responds to her emotions. I tried, she says, voice cracking. I listened. I did what he said. I know, Butcher replies, and for once there's no sarcasm in his voice. The walls groan. A nearby chair rattles, lifting slightly off the ground before crashing back down. 11 clutches her head, memories flooding in all at once. She was never meant to be free. The friends she found and the moments of warmth, they weren't miracles. They were accidents. The room begins to shake harder now. Dust falls from the ceiling. Butcher doesn't move away. He plants his boots firmly on the floor, bracing himself. "You're not broken," he says, raising his voice over the noise. "You were built that way on purpose." 11 looks up at him, tears streaking down her face, blood starting to drip from her nose. "They used me," she says. Butcher's jaw clenches. "Welcome to the club." The shaking stops as suddenly as it started. The silence that follows is suffocating. Butcher exhales slowly. "They took my wife," he continues, voice lower now. "Told the world a pretty story while they swept her under the rug. Same company, same lies." 11 stares at him, really seeing him for the first time. Not a monster, not a stranger, a survivor. "They don't stop," he says. "They don't feel bad, and they don't change. The only thing they understand is when someone stops running." 11 wipes her face with the sleeve of her gown. Her hands are steadier now, and her breathing slows. For the first time since she escaped the lab. Since Hawkins burned. Since the world became a nightmare of gods and monsters. Something inside her hardens. "I don't want to hide anymore," she says. Butcher studies her, searching for fear. He doesn't find it. "What do you want, then?" he asks. 11 stands. The air around her hums softly, responding not to panic, but resolve. "I want them to stop." A distant rumble echoes outside, the sound of Vaught's world moving on without knowing what it's just created. 11 takes a step forward. She isn't running anymore. And for Vought International, that might be the most dangerous thing of all. Vought International doesn't panic like normal people. They calculate. While Hawkins tears itself apart and the world watches carefully edited footage of localized unrest, the real decisions are being made 40 floors above the city, inside a boardroom designed to feel untouchable. Screens line the walls, live feeds, thermal scans, upside-down energy readings spiking off the charts. And in the center of it all is one name. 11. The conclusion comes quickly. Too quickly. She is no longer an asset. She is no longer a miracle. She is a liability. An executive breaks the silence with cold efficiency. "She opened the gate. She can close it. Or she dies trying." Another voice cuts in sharper. "And if she can't?" No one answers at first. Then the CEO says it plainly. "Then we harvest what's on the other side." That's Vaught's final plan. Kill 11, erase the variable, and weaponize the upside down directly. Not control it, not understand it. Use it. Entire divisions are activated. Black site research teams are mobilized. Scientists who once begged to shut the project down are dragged back in chains and told to make it work, or disappear with the rest of Hawkins. The upside down isn't a threat anymore, it's a resource. A place where fear is infinite, where creatures adapt faster than any supe ever could, where death doesn't end the experiment, it improves it. And there's only one person powerful enough to end 11 cleanly: Homelander. The order is delivered carefully, respectfully, like a favor. "Publicly, this never happened," an executive says, voice steady. "Privately, we need you to terminate Subject 11 and secure the site." Homelander doesn't respond. He just stares at the screen. Footage of 11 flashes, blooded, exhausted, holding back something that terrifies even Vaught's top minds. She doesn't look like a weapon. She looks like a survivor. Homelander smiles. A small one. Dangerous. "Terminate her," he repeats. "After all this?" The room shifts. They've seen this look before. An executive tries to regain control. "She's unstable, unpredictable. She nearly exposed us." Homelander tilts his head. "So did I, remember?" Silence. Another man pushes his luck. She's not like you. She wasn't perfected. That's when Homelander's eyes flicker red. Neither was I. The truth is something Homelander hasn't admitted to anyone, not even himself. 11 scares him. Not because she's stronger, because she's free. She wasn't raised to smile for cameras. She wasn't taught to beg for applause. Her power wasn't shaped by worship. It was shaped by pain. And pain is something Homelander understands better than anyone. She belongs to us, the CEO insists, to Vought. Homelander stands. No, he says softly. She belongs to me. The room erupts. This wasn't the deal. This wasn't approved. Homelander isn't supposed to think like this. He's supposed to obey. But obedience was always a lie. Vought built Homelander to be a god. They just forgot one thing. Gods don't follow orders. Homelander steps closer to the screen showing Hawkins. Burning, collapsing, bleeding into another world. You want the upside down, he desires? Fine, but killing her ends the fun. A security chief tries to call it in, backup, contingencies. Homelander doesn't even look at him. The man explodes against the wall in a spray of red as everyone freezes. Homelander turns back to the executives, calm again, almost cheerful. I'll handle 11, he says. My way. Someone whispers, barely audible. What if he doesn't come back? Homelander hears it anyway. He leans forward, eyes glowing just enough to remind them who's really in charge. Then you'll finally understand, he says, what it feels like to lose control. Moments later, Homelander lifts off from Vought Tower, breaking the sound barrier as he heads back toward Hawkins. No press release. No permission. No leash. Vought watches him disappear on the monitors, realizing the truth too late. They didn't just lose 11. They lost Homelander. And as the sky cracks open over Hawkins once more, one terrifying fact settles in. The most dangerous supe on Earth is no longer protecting the world. He's hunting it. Homelander has gone rogue. Again. Hawkins doesn't get evacuated. It gets abandoned. The official order comes too late and means nothing anyway. Roads are already split open, swallowed by black growths pulsing like veins. Cell towers collapse inward, bending toward invisible gravity wells. Any signal that escapes Hawkins dies seconds later, choked off by Vaught's kill switch. From the outside, the town simply goes dark. Inside, it becomes a war zone. Supes fight in the streets, not like heroes, but like animals cornered by something that refuses to die. Laser beams carve glowing scars through buildings, only for the walls to regrow in twisted reflections of themselves. Explosions tear creatures apart, and the pieces crawl back together, screaming in unison. A-Train tries to move civilians out, tries. He grabs a man, then a woman, then a child. And then the ground erupts beneath him, vines spear upward, wrapping around his legs, slowing him just enough. He tears free, heart pounding, realizing something terrifying. For the first time, speed isn't enough. Starlight holds a street intersection alone, light blazing from her hands, as dozens of civilians shelter behind overturned cars. Every blast knocks creatures back, but more keep coming. Climbing walls, crawling across ceilings, dropping from the sky like diseased rain. She shouts for backup. No one answers. The deep vanishes early, pulled beneath a street flooded by black water that smells like rot and metal. His scream echoes through the pipes long after his body is gone. No dramatic death, no final words. Just silence. Homelander tears through the sky, burning entire blocks to ash in seconds. He doesn't aim at the creatures anymore. He aims at everything. Buildings, streets, anything that moves. If he can't control Hawkins, he'll erase it. Civilians die by the hundreds. Families are crushed beneath collapsing homes. People trip, fall, and are dragged screaming into open portals that snap shut behind them. Children cry for parents who are already gone, voices swallowed by the roar of a town being eaten alive. The upside down spreads faster now, as if it senses fear reaching critical mass. Entire neighborhoods invert, flipping into red sky reflections of themselves. School hallways stretch impossibly long. Houses lead into forests that never end. Hawkins is no longer a place. It's a wound. Inside Vought Tower, executives watch the feeds in horror. This isn't a scandal, this isn't a lawsuit. This is extinction-level exposure. Orders are given without hesitation. Satellite coverage is cut. Emergency broadcasts are overridden. Every major network receives the same directive. Hawkins never happened. They call it a chemical disaster. Then a terrorist attack, and then nothing at all. The town disappears from maps. GPS routes reroute around an empty space. News anchors stop mid-sentence when the subject comes up, smiles plastered on their faces as they move on. Hawkins is erased while it's still burning. And in the center of it all stands 11. Blood runs from her nose, her ears, her eyes. She can barely stand, legs shaking, as reality buckles around her. The voices in her head are deafening. Screams, commands, fear, something else pressing in from beyond the veil. She sees the truth now. This isn't happening to Hawkins. Hawkins is in the way. The Upside Down doesn't want the town. It wants a door wide enough for something much larger to step through. The chaos, the deaths, the fear. All of it is feeding the tear in reality. And the Supes, they're just fuel. 11 looks at the sky, at Homelander, hovering above the ruins like a god losing his throne. She understands something horrifying in that moment. If this continues, there will be no line left to cross. So she makes a choice no one else is willing to make. She stops fighting the portals. She embraces them. The ground beneath Hawkins splits apart as 11 raises her hands. Every open tear responds, widening, connecting, stitching together into a single massive rupture in the air above the town. A gate the size of a city block forms, swirling with red lightning and ash. The creatures freeze. Homelander feels it instantly. A pressure so intense it forces him to his knees in midair. 11 screams, not in pain, but in defiance. If the Upside Down wants an entrance, she'll give it one, on her terms. As Hawkins collapses inwards, swallowed by shadow and flame, the gate opens fully, and the world holds its breath. Because whatever is about to come through won't stop at Hawkins. The world doesn't end with an explosion. It goes quiet. The portals stop expanding. The creatures retreat, not in fear, but in obedience. The air in Hawkins becomes heavy, like the town itself is holding its breath. At the center of it all, 11 stands alone. The largest tear in reality hovers before her, stretching higher than the buildings around it. Inside, the Upside Down twists and folds in on itself, no longer a reflection of Hawkins, but something deeper, older, stripped of imitation. This is not a place. It is a mind, and it is finally awake. 11 steps forward. The moment she crosses the threshold, the world turns inside out. Gravity loses meaning. Sound becomes memory. She isn't standing anymore. She's floating through fragments of herself, the lab, the tank, Brenner's voice, the screaming, Homelander's smile. The entity doesn't attack her. It shows her things. Cities swallowed by shadow, worlds stripped bare, species reduced to echoes drifting in black space. The Upside Down isn't invading. It's starving. It feeds on fear, not because it enjoys it, because fear is the only thing powerful enough to open the doors. 11 feels the truth sink in like ice water. Every scream, every panic, every moment of terror Hawkins has endured. All of it has been nourishment. The portals didn't open because of power. They opened because of emotion. The entity reaches for her not with claws, but with pressure, with weight, with the overwhelming presence of something that has never known resistance. And 11 fights back. She doesn't throw it across dimensions. She doesn't scream. She remembers. She remembers the quiet moments, the egos, the laughter. Mike's hand in hers. The first time she realized she wasn't a weapon. She was a person. The void shakes. The entity recoils, confused. These memories don't feed it. They weaken the space between worlds. Fear creates fractures. Hope seals them. And suddenly, 11 understands something terrifying. The Upside Down feeds on fear. So does Homelander. She sees him now. Not physically, but symbolically. A man hovering above crowds, a god who needs worship, who feeds on terror disguised as love, who becomes smaller the moment someone stops being afraid of him. They are not the same, but they are born from the same hunger. Control through fear. The entity presses harder, collapsing space around her. It floods her mind with visions designed to break her. Children screaming, the lab, Hawkins burning. Homelander's eyes glowing red as he tears the sky apart. 11's nose bleeds. Her ears ring. Her heart stutters. This thing is vast, ancient. It does not understand mercy. It does not understand choice. And it is winning. Her body begins to fail. Bones strain, blood pools in her lungs, her consciousness flickers as the Upside Down tries to pull her apart, molecule by molecule, fear by fear. But 11 does something no one ever taught her to do. She lets go. She stops pushing, stops fighting, stops being afraid. The psychic pressure collapses inward like a wave hitting a wall that isn't there anymore. The entity stumbles, not wounded but confused. For the first time in its existence, it cannot feed. The Upside Down begins to fold in on itself, not violently, but reluctantly, like a door being closed by someone who finally understands how it was opened. 11 pours everything she has left into the seal. Not rage, not pain, but resolve. The portals begin to shrink. The sky lightens, the air warms. The creatures dissolve into ash, unfinished and forgotten. The entity retreats, not destroyed, denied. And 11 falls. She crashes back into her body like a soul returning too late. Her heartbeat is faint, her breathing shallow. Her eyes don't open. Hawkins goes still. For a long moment, the world waits to see if she's alive. Then, a breath. Weak. Fragile. Real. 11 survives. Barely. But somewhere deep in the darkness between worlds, something watches the door close. And learns. Because fear may open gateways. But now something else has proven. It can shut them forever. Vought Tower has always been quiet at night. Not peaceful. Controlled. Every hallway lit just enough to see the cameras, every floor scrubbed clean of anything human. This is where monsters wear suits and call themselves executives. And tonight, the monster is done listening. Homelander lands inside the tower without an alarm ever sounding, and the sensors recognize him, the doors open for him. Vought built him to be a god, and gods don't need permission. The first scientist doesn't even see him. One moment she's reviewing Upside Down telemetry, whispering frantic notes into a recorder. The next, her head is gone. No scream, no warning, just a red mist painting the glass behind her. Homelander keeps walking. He doesn't rush, he doesn't shout, he doesn't threaten. He's calm. That's what makes it worse. In the control room, executives shout into headsets, ordering shutdowns that no longer matter. They speak his name like it's a command word. Homelander, stand down. He stops. Turns slowly. Smiles. I've been standing down my whole life. Laser vision floods the room. Not wild. Precise. Bodies drop in pieces. Limbs fall where people used to be. The room goes quiet, except for the hum of burning metal and the soft, wet sounds of what's left hitting the floor. Security teams pour in next. They unload everything. Bullets bounce, explosives detonate, fire fills the corridor. When the smoke clears, Homelander is still standing. Not a scratch. He walks forward, grabbing a man by the throat and lifting him off the ground like a child's toy. You told me she was contained, Homelander says softly. You lied. The man tries to speak, tries to beg. Homelander crushes his windpipe and lets the body drop. Floor by floor, Vought Tower becomes a slaughterhouse. Scientists, PR handlers, strategists, everyone who ever pretended they were in control. Blood coats the white walls, corporate art burns. Screens flash emergency messages that no one is left to read. This isn't rage. It's reclamation. Homelander reaches the central command chamber. The brain of Vaught's response to Hawkins. Holographic projections show the town tearing itself apart. Portals widening, creatures swarming. Executives once debated branding strategies here. Now they scream. Homelander floats to the center of the room and gestures for silence, and they obey. You don't know what you unleashed, one of them says, shaking. This isn't something you can fight. Homelander looks at the footage, at the creatures, at the spreading darkness, then back at them. I'm the only thing you've ever had that works. He raises his voice not just for them, but for the cameras still broadcasting somewhere, somehow. I am the solution. He turns back to the screens. Supes failed because you made them weak, afraid, apologetic. Another portal opens on screen. A creature drags a screaming family into the dark. Homelander's smile fades. This ends now. He kills the rest of the room in seconds. No speeches, no anger, just efficiency. When it's done, Homelander stands alone in the wreckage of the company that created him. Blood drips from his cape, smoke rises behind him like a throne. Outside, the world watches the narrative change in real time. Emergency broadcasts cut in. A single image fills the screen. Homelander, uninjured, unafraid. My fellow Americans, he says, voice steady. A threat beyond imagination has attacked our homeland. He pauses. But don't be afraid. Behind his eyes, something cracks. I will handle it. The message spreads everywhere. Supes fall in line, military units retreat. Vaught's remaining leadership vanishes into silence. And then Homelander turns off the cameras. For the first time, there is no audience. Only one name left in his mind. 11. The girl who hurt him. The girl who made him feel small. The girl who isn't afraid. Homelander steps into the night sky, leaving Vought Tower burning behind him. And as he flies toward Hawkins, toward the storm, the portals, the impossible, he smiles. This time, he's not going to share the spotlight. This time, he's going alone. There are no sirens left in Hawkins. No screaming crowds. No helicopters. No cameras brave enough to stay close. Only wind and ruin. The town is unrecognizable. Streets split open, buildings leaning at impossible angles, the sky permanently stained with ash and red lightning from the open gate behind 11. She stands at the center of it all. Barefoot, bleeding, trembling, not weak, focused. Then the air vibrates. A sonic boom rips through the clouds as Homelander drops from the sky, cracking the ground beneath his boots. His cape snaps behind him like a flag planted on conquered land. He smiles. Look at you, he says softly. All this for a town that never mattered. 11 doesn't answer. The ground around her rises. Cars, concrete, shattered homes lifting into the air like debris caught in a hurricane. Homelander's smile fades. He moves first, faster than sound. The impact is nuclear. 11 slams through 3 buildings before she even registers the hit, her body skidding across the street, blood painting the asphalt. Homelander is already above her, laser eyes burning, heat slicing through smoke and shadow. She screams, not in pain but in defiance. The lasers bend, twist, warp. 11 catches them with her mind, forcing them away, redirecting the blast into the sky where it splits the clouds open like torn flesh. Homelander lands again, harder this time, fist crashing into her ribs, bones crack. The world spins. This is what he does best. Raw power. No restraint, no mercy. He throws her through a school, then a church, then buries her beneath the remains of Hawkins' courthouse. Silence. For half a second, Homelander believes he's won. Then the rubble explodes outward. 11 rises slowly, eyes blackened, blood floating backward into her wounds as her power surges uncontrollably. The Upside Down reacts. The sky warps, the ground pulses like a living thing. She doesn't attack him. She looks at him, and Homelander feels it. A pressure behind his eyes, a hand reaching inside his skull. "Get out," he growls, firing his lasers wildly. 11 doesn't dodge. She steps closer, and suddenly, he's not in Hawkins anymore. Homelander blinks, and he's a child again. A white room, cold floors, scientists watching through glass. No applause, no cheers, no love. Just fear. His fear. 11 drags it all to the surface. Every moment he pretended didn't matter. Every time he smiled because he was told to. Every time someone flinched instead of hugged him. "Stop," he whispers. The town shakes as Homelander screams, unleashing a shockwave that levels what's left of Hawkins. Buildings collapse inwards, streets fold, the map of the town is erased in seconds. But it doesn't stop her. 11 forces him to see it all. The truth he buried deeper than anyone else ever could. That without the cameras, without the crowds, without the lies, he is nothing. Homelander drops to one knee. He tries to stand, and fails. For the first time in his life, his strength means nothing. His voice cracks. "Make it stop." 11 staggers, blood pouring from her nose, her ears, her eyes. This is killing her too. Every second risks tearing her apart from the inside. But she doesn't let go. She leans close, whispering into the ear of the most powerful supe on earth. "You're afraid," she says. And that's when it breaks him. Homelander screams, not in rage, not in anger, but in pure, naked terror. The sound echoes through the ruins, louder than the collapse of Hawkins itself, louder than the thunder tearing the sky open above them. A god begging to be spared. 11 releases him. Homelander collapses into the dirt, shaking, sobbing, his hands clawing at the ground as if afraid it might disappear beneath him. The fight is over. Not because he was beaten, but because he was exposed. And as the gate behind them roars, swallowing the last remnants of Hawkins into nothingness, one truth is undeniable. For the first time in the world's history, Homelander is afraid of what he's become. The battle doesn't end with a victory. It ends with silence, not the peaceful kind, not relief. This is the hollow quiet that follows a disaster so complete that the world needs a moment to remember how to breathe. Hawkins is gone. Where neighborhoods once stood, there is nothing but scorched earth and twisted debris. Streets end abruptly in craters. Buildings lean at impossible angles, frozen in the final seconds before collapse. The air smells like ash, ozone, and something older. A rot that doesn't belong to this world. At the center of it all stands 11, or what's left of her. The final gate to the Upside Down tears open above Hawkins like a wound that refuses to close. Reality bends inward, screaming as the two worlds try to occupy the same space. The sky fractures into red lightning, gravity fails. Debris floats, then shatters, then vanishes into nothing. 11 steps forward alone. There is no speech, no dramatic declaration. Just a girl who has spent her entire life being used, finally choosing what she will give and what she will lose. She reaches out, not with anger, not with fear, but with exhaustion. The Upside Down resists. It always has. The presence behind it pushes back, testing her limits, peeling away memories, emotions, fragments of who she is. 11 screams, not from pain, but from recognition. She feels herself slipping, Moments disappear first. The sound of laughter in a basement. The warmth of a shared meal. A boy's voice calling her name. Her nose bleeds. Her ears ring. Blood runs down her chin, dripping into the air and freezing there, suspended like everything else. But she doesn't stop. The gate begins to close. Not snapping shut, but being sewn together, strand by strand. Reality stitching itself back into place through her sheer will. The red sky darkens. The ash falls upwards, sucked back into the void. The creatures scream as they are dragged away, bodies unraveling into shadows. The presence on the other side recoils. Not defeated, but denied. And then, with a sound like the universe exhaling, the gate collapses inward. Gone. The upside down is sealed. 11 falls. By the time the ground settles, the world has changed. Hawkins is no longer a town. It's a grave. Thousands of dead, civilians, soldiers, supes. Families erased in seconds, their lives reduced to numbers in reports that will never be public. Bodies are pulled from rubble for days, sometimes weeks, sometimes not at all. There are no memorials, no names carved into stone, just unmarked trucks and sealed files. 11 survives. Technically, she wakes up in a dark room, monitors beeping softly around her. Her eyes open slowly, unfocused. People speak, but the words don't land. They slide off her like rain on glass. Something is missing. Not her powers. Those still hum faintly, unstable, unpredictable. It's something worse. She doesn't remember why she fought. Faces blur, emotions arrive muted, distant, like echoes in a hallway she can't quite reach. She knows people mattered to her. She just can't remember how. The cost wasn't her life. It was herself. Outside that room, the world moves on, or pretends to. Vought acts fast. Hawkins is officially declared the site of a catastrophic industrial accident. Chemical contamination, structural collapse, an unprecedented chain reaction. The footage is buried, witnesses are silenced. Supes are praised for preventing a global disaster. No mention of children, no mention of portals, no mention of another world pressing against ours, waiting for a chance to return. The media eats it up. They always do. Homelander stands in front of cameras, promising safety, stability, protection. His smile never wavers. But something behind his eyes does. He felt it, the thing beyond the gate, the thing that didn't fear him. And it terrifies him more than any enemy ever has. As for 11, she is listed as deceased. Another casualty of Hawkins. Another name erased. Somewhere far from the cameras, far from Vought, a girl sits quietly, staring at a wall that flickers with static when she's upset. She doesn't know why she feels sad, or angry, or tired beyond her years. She just knows something important was taken from her. And no one will ever know why. Because the world was saved. And the truth died with Hawkins. By morning, Hawkins no longer exists. On every map, it's a blur, a censored rectangle, a redacted wound in the middle of the country. Satellite images refuse to load. GPS reroutes around it like the town was never there. And before the bodies are even counted, Vought goes to work. The first press conference happens 12 hours later. A polished stage, a patriotic backdrop. Flags flanking a row of perfectly smiling executives. Behind them, a massive screen displays the new headline being fed to the world. Terrorist cell neutralized by America's heroes. They speak slowly, carefully, each word rehearsed. They blame an extremist group no one's heard of, a shadow organization funded by foreign powers who hate American freedom. They say Hawkins was targeted because of a nearby energy facility that never existed. And they say the Supes saved thousands. Footage rolls. Carefully edited clips of Homelander hovering heroically above smoke, starlight pulling children from rubble. A-Train carrying the injured at super speed, never showing where those injuries came from. The creatures are gone from the narrative. The portal's never mentioned. The Upside Down is renamed a chemical hallucination event. Anyone who claims otherwise is labeled traumatized, unstable, a conspiracy theorist. Social media is flooded with hashtags within minutes. #Heroes saved us. #Hawkins arc strong. #thank you Vought. The outrage doesn't disappear, it's redirected. Foreign governments deny involvement. Vought responds with leaked intelligence reports, grainy images, fake intercepted calls, enough ambiguity to keep the truth buried under noise. The public argues, which is exactly the point. Inside Vought Tower, another meeting happens. This one without cameras. They review casualty numbers in silence. Then they delete a name, Subject 011. Every file referencing her is flagged, overwritten, or sealed. Security footage vanishes. Medical records become corrupted. Birth certificates are erased. Even Dr. Brenner's private research is scrubbed down to vague notes about failed psychic trials. 11 is removed from history, not declared dead, not declared alive. Just gone. To acknowledge her would mean admitting the truth. The Vought didn't lose control. They never had it. Homelander watches the press coverage from a private room. He doesn't smile. He doesn't rage. He stares at the screen as anchors praise his leadership, his courage, his sacrifice. He hears his own voice echoing back at him through carefully chosen sound bites. And beneath it all, something gnaws at him. Because for the first time, there was something he couldn't kill. Something that didn't fear him. That uncertainty festers. Meanwhile, in a dim underground safehouse miles away from Hawkins, Billy Butcher watches the same broadcast with a very different expression. No anger, no surprise, just exhaustion. Same bloody playbook, he mutters. MMM stands behind him, arms crossed. Frenchie paces. Huey looks sick. They know better. They were there. Butcher pulls out a battered hard drive, scratched, burned at the edges, saved at the last possible second before the systems went dark. He plugs it in. Files open. Corrupted, fragmented, incomplete. But not erased. Video logs from Hawkins' lab. Brenner's voice shaking as he describes interdimensional exposure. Security footage of a terrified girl being led down a hallway lined with Vought logos. Medical scans showing brain activity that doesn't make sense. And one final file. Audio only. The child's breathing. Not scared. Not angry. Determined. Butcher leans back in his chair, eyes never leaving the screen. Vought wants the world to forget you, he says quietly. The file finishes loading. A date appears at a location. Redacted, but not destroyed. Butcher smiles for the first time in days. It isn't a happy smile. It's a promise. Outside, the world celebrates heroes that never saved it. Inside that room, one man keeps the truth alive. Not because he believes in justice, but because one day, when Vought finally falls, someone will need to remember how it all really began. And this time, they won't be able to erase her. When the noise finally dies, when the portals seal, the screaming stops, and the sky over Hawkins returns to a dull, broken grey, the world begins asking the wrong questions. They ask how many people died. They ask which supe saved the day. They ask what Vought will rebuild first. But no one asks where 11 went, because there is no body, no crater, no remains, no heroic footage to loop on the news, just an empty space where she was last seen. Scorched concrete, warped metal, and a faint smell of ozone that refuses to fade. Vaught's recovery teams arrive within hours. They sweep Hawkins with surgical efficiency, sealing evidence, burning records, scrubbing cameras. Drones hover low, scanning for Compound 5 signatures, radiation, anything that can be explained. They find nothing. No psychic residue. No trace of a living mind. no death. And somehow, that scares them more. Officially, Vought declares 11 a casualty. A classified experiment terminated during a foreign attack. Her name never appears in public. There is no face, no memorial, no outrage. Just a redacted file marked closed. But Butcher doesn't buy it. He stands at the edge of the blast zone long after everyone else leaves, boots planted in ash, staring at the ground like it might speak back. He's seen bodies vanish before. This doesn't feel like that. Frenchie combs through sensor data, broken equipment, anything that might have recorded her last moments. The readings spike violently, then flatline in a way that doesn't match death. Notices something else, the silence. No psychic echo, no lingering presence. It's as if 11 didn't die. It's as if she left. The boys make a decision without ever saying it out loud. They stop looking. Because in their world, being declared dead by Vought is the closest thing to safety a kid like 11 will ever get. They erase what little they have. They bury files. They destroy backups. Even Huey, who still believes in saving people, understands this one truth. If Vought thinks 11 is gone, they won't hunt her. Weeks pass. Hawkins is wiped from the map, renamed, rebranded, repopulated. The world moves on because it always does. Supes are praised. Vaught's stock recovers. Homelander gives a speech about sacrifice with eyes that never stop scanning the crowd. But sometimes, power grids hiccup. Static creeps into radio broadcasts for half a second longer than it should. Screens distort just for a moment like reality itself hesitates. And in places far from Hawkins, in empty deserts, deep forests, forgotten buildings, things bend without being touched. Somewhere, a girl opens her eyes. Or maybe she doesn't. Maybe there are no eyes anymore, and maybe there is no body. Just awareness, floating between places, between worlds. She remembers the noise, the fear, the way the Upside Down screamed when she pushed back. She remembers Homelander's face, and not the anger, not the power, the fear. And she remembers choosing, not to win, not to stay, but to end it. Whether 11 is dead depends on who you ask. To Vought, she's a failed investment. To the world, she never existed. To the boys, she's a ghost they protect by never saying her name. And to whatever still sleeps beyond the sealed gates, she is the reason they can't open them again. Late one night in a safe house far from cameras and lies, Huey flips through static on an old television. Just noise, just habit. Then the screen stutters. The static pulls inward for less than a second, an image forms. A dark void. A breath. A single word whispered through distortion. Friends. The screen snaps back to nothing. Huey doesn't tell anyone. But somewhere deep beneath the layers of lies, cover-ups, and corporate victories, a flicker of static lingers, waiting, watching, and reminding the world that monsters don't always stay buried. Sometimes, they choose to disappear. The world doesn't celebrate. There are no victory speeches, no triumphant press conferences, no flags waving in the streets, because whatever happened in Hawkins didn't feel like a win. The town is gone, not destroyed, not evacuated, but erased. Where Hawkins once stood, there is now a fenced-off scar in the earth, miles of dead land, soil that refuses to grow anything. Instruments malfunction the closer they get. Animals won't cross the perimeter. Vought calls it an environmental disaster. Everyone else just calls it off-limits. The portals are sealed. The air no longer bleeds. The sky has returned to its proper color. On paper, the crisis is over. But nothing feels normal. Homelander stands on the roof of Vought Tower, staring down at the city he once ruled effortlessly. The cheers are still there. The crowd still scream his name. He hears none of it. Ever since Hawkins, something has changed inside him. The world feels thinner, no longer solid. Like at any moment it might tear again. And this time, it won't stop. He sleeps less, When he does, he dreams of eyes in the dark, watching him the way he watches everyone else. Sometimes he wakes up hovering, heat vision active, breathing like he's been running. The other Supes notice. They keep their distance now. Meetings end early when Homelander enters the room. Conversations stop mid-sentence. Jokes die on lips that suddenly remember how fragile they are. Because for the first time, Supes know something terrifying. There is something out there that doesn't care about them. Not about fame, not about power, not about fear. During the Hawkins incident, Supes didn't save the day. They stalled. They distracted. They survived by accident. And they all felt it. That moment when the creatures stopped reacting to their powers. When the darkness adapted. When something vast moved behind reality itself, as if Supes were nothing more than noise. Starlight reviews the footage in private, watching frame-by-frame distortions in the air that shouldn't exist anymore. The Deep refuses to go near water that's too still. A-Train swears he hears something breathing whenever he runs too fast, like the world itself can't keep up with him. Vought assures them it's over. Internal memos insist the upside-down breach was a singular event, a closed system, a door that was opened and permanently sealed. But deep in the black site archives, the truth is buried under clearance codes and redacted files. The upside-down wasn't destroyed. It was contained. And containment, as Vought knows better than anyone, is never permanent. Across the world, tiny anomalies begin to appear. A mirror fogs from the wrong side. A child draws a place they've never seen. Dead trees under a red sky. A radio picks up a heartbeat between stations. Scientists dismiss it. Vought buries it. The media never hears a word. But the fear spreads anyway. Not panic, not hysteria. Something quieter, something deeper. The kind of fear that comes from knowing the rules have changed. And no one told you what the new ones are. The boys watch from the shadows. Butcher keeps Hawkins off the books, but not out of his mind. He drinks more, sleeps less, stares at footage of the sealed gate like it might blink if he looks away. MM knows better than to trust clean endings. Frenchie swears he feels watched in empty rooms. And Huey listens. Because late at night, when the city is quiet and the noise fades, he swears he can hear something beneath everything else. A rhythm, not a voice, not a signal. A knock, once, then again soft, patient, like something tapping on glass. Across the world, the same sound echoes in places no one is monitoring anymore. Basements, abandoned labs, forgotten tunnels. Not enough to break through. Not yet. The upside down is sealed. But on the other side of the door, something is awake. And it knows exactly where we are. The world never hears the word Hawkins again. It's erased from maps, from records, from memory. Replaced by a sterile phrase Vought repeats until it loses all meaning. A classified incident. News anchors speak calmly about a containment failure, about heroism, about sacrifice. Carefully edited footage shows Supes saving civilians, smiling, victorious. There are no portals on television, no screaming, no children bleeding from their noses. The truth is buried so deep that even conspiracy theorists can't find it. But something fundamental has changed. Before Hawkins, Supes were apex predators. They were gods on billboards, untouchable, inevitable. When Homelander flew overhead, people didn't wonder if he could kill them. They wondered why he hadn't yet. That certainty is gone. Because Hawkins proved something Vought spent decades trying to hide. Supes can bleed. Not just physically, existentially. The creatures from the upside down didn't fear laser eyes. They didn't worship strength. They didn't care about branding or reputation or power rankings. They adapted. They learned. And worst of all, they forced Supes to react instead of dominate. For the first time, the world saw heroes who didn't know what to do. And once that illusion cracks, it never fully heals. Inside Vought Tower, panic replaces confidence. Executives don't sleep. Entire departments vanish overnight. Research budgets are redirected, shredded, rewritten. Projects once labeled the future are quietly terminated. Files connected to Hawkins are sealed behind layers of clearance so deep that even Homelander can't access them without triggering alarms. Vought is still powerful, but it is no longer invincible. There are gaps now, weak points, blind spots, and there are people who know exactly where to look. Butcher doesn't smile about it. He's seen too much to enjoy victory. Still, he keeps the file. The one Vought missed, footage, names, data on children who were tested and survived. Because that's the real nightmare Vought can't spin. Not monsters, not dimensions. Children. Hawkins wasn't an anomaly. It was a prototype. A proof of concept. 11 wasn't the weapon. She was the warning. Somewhere out there, other kids are growing up under the shadow of experiments they don't understand. Powers that don't come from Compound 5. Abilities that don't need syringes or marketing campaigns or corporate approval. Powers that don't want to be owned. And that terrifies Vought more than any monster ever could. Homelander feels it too. He doesn't talk about Hawkins. He never mentions the Upside Down. But something is wrong now. His smiles linger too long, his rages come faster. He listens more than he used to. Because for the first time in his life, Homelander knows there is something in this world that doesn't care if he exists. And something that could replace him. The Upside Down is sealed. That's what they tell the public. But seals can weaken, and doors can be reopened. Especially when other universes exist. Watching, waiting, colliding at the edges of reality. Hawkins was not the end. It was the beginning of a new rule. A world where supes are no longer the final threat. Where corporations can lose control. Where children grow up faster than they should. And stronger than anyone intended. And somewhere, in the static between dimensions, something stirs. Drawn not by power but by attention. Because when universes collide, they don't stop at one town. They don't stop at one world. They spread. And next time, Hawkins won't be the only place that disappears. This was just the first crack.